Hi everyone, welcome back to the weekly politics show. It's 2022. So in this exciting lineup, we've got our first section is Citizen Andrew. Everyone probably heard Andrew's chucked his hat in the ring in terms of his candidacy for the mayoralty of Tower Hamlets. So I'm going to have a discussion with Andrew, ask some questions. And then moving on, we're going to discuss the budget. So the budget is coming up. That's going to be really contentious. It's an election year. Let's see what's in there. Are there any surprises, or do we anticipate any surprises? And then moving on, we're going to talk about St. George's. That's a massive issue of the swimming pool closing down in Shadwell, in the Shadwell area, north of Wapping. So there's been a lot of discussions about that. And then finally, we're going to talk about the proposed Ballymore building in the Canary Wharf. I think 52-story, and there's some. It was going to go to planning, got pulled back. There's issues about fire safety, so we're going to talk about that. So we're going to go straight into a break. After a break, we're going to go straight into our first section, Citizen Andrew. My Q&A with Cllr Andrew Wood about his bid on the mayoralty of Tower Hamlets. Hi everyone, welcome back to the weekly politics show. I'm Councillor Puru with co-host Cllr Andrew Wood. So in this section, it's Citizen Andrew. So I'm going to discuss Andrew's mayoral bid. Just want to tell viewers, I did get into a bit of hot bother with some Labour Party colleagues. They were wondering what my role is in Andrew's mayoral bid, etc. There was a move by the Galactic Empire, but then someone told the Emperor about the words of Obi-Wan: strike him down and you make him more powerful than he is. So that's the machinations with myself and this show and Andrew's bid at the town hall. But moving on, Andrew, surprise, you've chucked your hat in the ring in terms of the mayoralty of Tower Hamlets. And so I've been talking to a lot of people surprised. A lot of people thought it was a fresh breath of air, so to speak, especially the approach on social media. But a lot of people are surprised that I think a lot of people, I know you've mentioned it before, that you resigned from the Conservative Party, that you're independent. I think that's the first time a lot of people noticed when you chucked your ring in as an independent candidate that you're not part of the Conservative Party. So do you just want to talk about that journey, and then I'll just to clarify to viewers and listeners as to what your relationship is with your former party, so to speak?
Okay, yeah. So I guess two things. First is I will be a candidate for mayor for Tower Hamlets. There are kind of two stages to this process. So there's this kind of early stage where people say whether they want to be candidates or not. And then from the 28th of March, there's a week where you actually have to submit your nomination papers. So I need to get 30 people to sign a piece of paper saying that they agree that Andrew Wood should be a candidate. So that's a separate process. It's only after that you become a formal candidate and all of the rules stick in. I'll also be running to be councillor for Canary Wharf as well. So that's a plan B, just in case I don't become mayor. But I guess the reason for doing it is, I was kind of thinking last year, I wasn't particularly happy with the choices on offer. And it does look like it's a contest between, the two heavyweight champions of Tower Hamlets, John Biggs on one side and Lutfer Rahman on the other side. And that wasn't a contest that kind of filled me with a lot of joy or excitement. And I kind of worried that a lot of the debate would be, well, no, John was the worst mayor. And no, Lutfer was the worst mayor. John did this, Lutfer did that. They're both terrible, etc., etc. And the reality is, both John and Lutfer have their good points and their bad points. Arguably Lutfer more than John. But I wanted to kind of have a debate about the future and about what an exciting place Tower Hamlets is, all of the fantastic opportunities we have. We've got lots of cash, we've got a growing population, we've got all of these new buildings. So let's have a more positive debate about changes in the future and about what we can do to make Tower Hamlets a better place. So my original plan wasn't actually to be a mayoral candidate, was to have a debate and then to kind of have, I'm calling it a kind of co-produced manifesto. So basically, I'll write a manifesto, but I'll publish the drafts and seek ideas. So for example, if you're on Facebook, there's a new Facebook group called A Vision for Tower Hamlets. And in that group, I've been asking some questions and little polls. And then somebody posted about blue badges today. So we had a debate today about blue badge policy. So the idea is that, we'll have this public debate and then it will all feed through into this sort of manifesto. And the idea is that hopefully other candidates will then pick up some of these ideas, and whoever is the eventual mayor will then want to run with some, maybe not all of these ideas. And then the idea of me being a candidate was for two reasons. Number one is legal reasons to do with some of the shenanigans, some of the problems within some of the leaflets that have been distributed. So if a leaflet is now distributed, I can say that negatively impacts me because I'm an official candidate at this stage. But the second reason is that, if we do come up with these really good ideas and a great manifesto, and that's still a big if because there's a lot of work to do. But let's say we do that and people like the idea. The idea is I then stand and sort of say, well, a vote for me is a vote for those ideas. And if I get enough votes, A, I might affect the eventual outcome. B, I might win. I mean, there were three Facebook polls that were done in 3 different Facebook groups. And in 2 of them, I was leading. And in the second one, I was second after Cllr. I'm not saying those polls are scientific or accurate or anything like that at all. But like in the group that I run, and obviously I would have expected to do well, So I got 768 votes. Lutfi Rahman got 57. John got 47 votes. Rabina 10, and anyone but Lutfi got 10 votes. And I would have expected to do well in a Facebook group that I run, but I have been genuinely surprised about how poorly John Biggs has done. And I know, that this is not reflective. This is people who are very active on social media, so that's not reflective of the wider voting public. But I still thought it was interesting nonetheless. So that's the general idea of my campaign, to try and come up with something more positive for the future of Tower Hamlets. And if people like it, great. And in terms of me being used to be a conservative, some people will always hold that against me and won't vote for me because that's where I came from politically. But I quit the Conservative Party in February of last year. I'm still in the Conservative group of councillors, which I know confuses people, and that's simply in order to have an opposition group. If I'd left the Conservative group, there wouldn't have been any opposition party in Tower Hamlets from February of last year until last autumn when Aspire won the Weavers' Ward by-election and also formed a political group as well. But I didn't know that last February. So that's the reason why I kind of stayed in, because I think, Tower Hamlets needs an opposition.
Well, the interesting thing is the Greens are not putting up a mayoral candidate. Mm-hmm. And so the way I see it, you're seeing the manifesto process to give voices to groups out there who don't, at the moment, have a voice. So the fact is, the reality is Tower Hamlets is a one-party state, with Labour with a supermajority and an executive mayor. So if people are not happy with local Labour or feel that those ideas or their concerns are not expressed, then I guess your manifesto process is a way of actually feeding in those concerns. Is that correct? And it'd be quite interesting to see what comes up and what the issues are, especially for me as an elected official, to see whether I'm in a bubble or where I'm actually in touch with a lot of the concerns, so to speak. Has there been any surprises of issues so far?
So, we're still at the beginning of the process, and so far I'm mainly interacting with people who I already know from Facebook. And this will be one of the weaknesses of this process. It will mainly be on social media. But then having said that, we're still in a COVID situation where it's difficult to hold physical meetings. And I will have a program of going out to each area and sort of trying to meet as many people as possible. So I'll try and go to all 20 wards over the coming months to have that kind of wider debate and attend hustings and all the rest of it. But having said that, given the demographics of Tower Hamlets, the reality is that, most people are on social media, and it is a way of reaching, lots of people. So the Facebook group that I run is just short of 30,000 members. Most of them are from Tower Hamlets. So, you can have some very interesting debates with really large groups of people. So I think it'll be interesting when we actually come to it. So, for example, I did do a poll earlier on council tax. Well, maybe this is not a surprise, I suppose. And obviously, the biggest vote so far has been for no council tax increase in this coming year. And then the second highest vote is actually for the 1% increase, which is what Mayor John Biggs is proposing to have. So, but that's probably not a surprise, because when it comes to tax, nobody wants to pay more tax. But no, I think it'll be an interesting process, especially if the Greens don't run. I don't agree with the Greens on everything, but for the last 12 years, my apartment has been powered purely by renewable energy. So I've only used renewable energy in my apartment for 12 years now. So a lot of the green agenda I do agree with. It's very interesting to see what the Greens do in Germany. And it's also been very interesting to see that, the Greens have actually done quite well in some of the council by-elections outside of London. They've been beating the Conservatives and the Labour Party, quite decisively in some by-elections across the country. So I think that would be very interesting to see how the Greens do generally as well in Tower Hamlets, where I think they will be standing councillor candidates in some places.
Well, it'll be interesting to see the battle of ideas. So just to give viewers and listeners an idea, the way the Labour Party works is there's a consultation of members, quote unquote consultation, that's taken on board by the Labour group of councillors, and then they put a document together, and then the Labour group of councillors agree on that manifesto, and then that's published. So that hasn't been done yet. And there are some big issues of rising land prices and overdevelopment, so to speak, and the impact that it has on areas. Be interested to see whether that's taken up, because the other issue is obviously the usual suspects of ASB, rubbish collection. That's been an issue, but how can we improve things structurally? So it'd be interesting to see what other ideas come out. Do you see yourself as the Emmanuel Macron of Tower Hamlets, Andrew? Because Macron started off like that, with having people go out and asking people in France, what are the problems? What is wrong with France, so to speak? And then he formed a party and became president. Do you see yourself as the Emmanuel Macron of Tower Hamlets, asking people what's wrong with Tower Hamlets, and then having a collective solution?
I actually hadn't thought of that. Strangely enough, I've actually been listening recently to it's an Audible book where you sort of listen to the book. It's from the early 1970s, it's called State of Emergency by Dominic Sambrook, who's written some really good books about the kind of history of Britain post-war. And he's talking about Edward Heath right now, the Conservative Prime Minister who was elected in 1970. And I was actually thinking, I'm actually a bit like Edward Heath in terms of his mannerisms and what he likes about policy, and the sort of the feeling that managerial solutions will solve all of the problems. So I also saw that as a bit of a warning to myself as well, because Edward Heath wasn't that successful in the 1970s, except ironically, obviously, for joining the original European Union. But no, I think, looking across other countries, there have been insurgent parties like the Pirate Party in other countries that have been very successful. In Italy, what they call the Five Star, like movement again, sort of starting off non-political, have been very successful as well. So I think, there is a possibility that people are bored with the existing kind of traditional parties. and might want to try something new. So maybe I am the change candidate. So I think it will be generally interesting and fun. So one of the reasons I'm doing this is to bring a bit of fun into the process, to see what happens in these elections and over the coming months.
Well, it has spooked a lot of people. I know me and you, both of us have received some really odd emails asking us questions whether we're part of some great conspiracy. No, we're not part of any conspiracy. Why were we at certain meetings together, etc. But no, so it's going to be interesting. It has spooked a lot of people. It'd be interesting to see, and generally just talking to people. People are excited. It's a genuine breath of fresh air. That's what it is. It's just an alternative space to have some adult conversations. That's the feedback I've got. So it'd be an interesting process. I know there are activist groups out there who want to do hustings, etc., to talk about specific issues. So it'd be an interesting perspective to have yourself and other voices there to provide an alternative to the grueling boxing match that we will be subjected to of two tired boxers boxing it out the last match before they retire, so to speak. So we're going to go straight into a break. So Andrew, just before we go straight into a break, where can people find out about your Facebook group or the discussion group that you're having or the manifesto? How can people feed into it, or people are just curious, or say Labour Party members who just want to keep an eye on you? Where do they go?
Yeah, so I mean, the main debates so far are on that Facebook group called A Vision for Tower Hamlets. It's public, so you don't have to be on Facebook to actually read it. I am working on the website as well. There will be surveys, but the plan very much is to do as much of this in the public domain as possible. And I'll announce next week. So physical, I'll stand on a street corner on, Roman Road at X time on X date, so people can come up and talk to me. And I also do some like Zoom meetings as well, kind of talking about topics. I'm thinking about doing one next week to talk about development, which I know we'll talk about in a minute, and some of the challenges that brings for Tower Hamlets. So part of this will be also be educational about what the mayor can and can't do, what we need the government to do as well, and also to make a push to educate people about the difference between the mayor and councillors and what those two roles are all about.
Are you looking for volunteers? For example, if someone wants to help you out, how do they help you out? What's the best way of them?
So just email me. So just Google my name, Andrew Wood, Tower Hamlets. Somebody offered to help yesterday, which sounded like a very serious offer. So I need to write back to them tonight with a process as to how that's going to work. So.
Cool. Watch this space. Someone did accuse this show of being a platform for Andrew's secret platform for being Andrew's mayoral bid, but then someone did say that we were the equivalent of Ian St. John's and Greavesy of townless politics, and people a bit of light entertainment. So we're going to go straight into a break. After the break, we're going to go straight into the budget. And ask the question, what's going to be in the budget, and how that's going to have an impact on the election. So we're going to go straight into it. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Weekly Politics Show. I'm Councillor Puru with co-host Councillor Andrew Wood on the weekly on Relax Radio. So in this section, we're going to talk about the budget. So the budget is being decided. It's going through its final sort of shape, so to speak. Especially the spending increases. We all anticipate just before an election. Andrew, any surprises in what you've seen so far? I know someone showed me a chart where after elections you have this massive tax increase and cuts to services, and just before every election year, you see a reverse in that. You increase spending and less council tax. Yeah, has that been more of the same, or has there been any surprises to that?
No. So once again, just like in 2018, before the last local elections, the council tax increase is relatively small. So to give you an example, in 2018, it was only 2% increase. Then 2019, it was 3.4%. Then 2020, it was 3.99%. And then last year, it was 4.99% increase. And this year, the mayor is proposing only 1% increase, which is lower than I wasn't expecting that, to be honest. And the reason why he can afford to do that is because actually they've got a lot more money this year than they thought they would have a year ago. So to give you some idea is, so last January they thought in this coming year that they'd only have 106 million pounds from government. They're actually forecasting now that they'll get 138 million pounds. So that's up 30%. Business rates they thought would only have 112 million pounds. They now think it's 129 million pounds. So that's up 15%. So there's a lot more money coming in than what they said they would have. So as a result, even though they're putting up spending will increase by 6.5% compared to what they thought it would be, they can get away with council tax only going up 1%. And despite all of that, in the budget, there's a line which is called allocation to one-off projects to be confirmed, £5.4 million. So basically, they've got £5.4 million of excess money. It's a one-off, so they don't necessarily expect this money every year. That they want to allocate to something they haven't decided yet. So I did put on Facebook saying, how do you want to spend £5.4 million in the next year? Because it's a lot of money. So if you've got any ideas, let Mayor John Biggs know, or me know, your local politicians know, because that will be part of the budget process, I think, is deciding how to spend that money.
It might be for the Jubilee celebrations for Her Majesty. I know we were getting a bank holiday. It's probably Tower Hamlets might do a special event to celebrate. But I think it is typical of the executive mayoralty, and you've seen it with the previous mayor as well, that you do have a lot of discretion in terms of what you can do with the public funds, in terms of one-off grants, etc. So it'll be interesting to see under what categories or what objectives they're meeting, because I know both mayoral candidates are meeting up with special interest groups, etc., who are sort of like putting certain demands forward or demonstrating certain needs, and it'll be interesting to see how they respond to that. And so like I think we're going to get more clarity at the end of this month as to where that £5.4 million is going to be spent. But is this the right way of using public funds? Andrew, should we discuss more the structural issues? Like, for example, what I've discovered is there's a marked increase in terms of ASB. Now, that might be because the police have adopted a different approach, so quote-unquote intelligence-led policing, where they don't go after small issues. They if they're going to do an arrest, they arrest about 10, 12 people at a time, which gives the impression that, things have just let loose, so to speak. Shouldn't we be addressing those kind of, having those discussions sort of ish, instead of these one-off payments? Is it?
So I think there's two problems. So part one problem is that the council always fears the worst about future funding years. So every year, and we've seen this for years, is they always underestimate the income that's going to come in future years. So that leads them down the road of making bigger cuts than I think they need to do. And I know there's a very vocal Labour councillor, who I'm not going to embarrass by saying his name, but he's, he says this every year, and he's absolutely right. He always says, you underestimate the income, you cut too much, or you plan to cut too much, and then next year actually there's more money than you expected. But, to be fair to the council, there is a genuine difficulty about forecasting future years. So this budget, it's a 1 year only budget, whereas normally we do 3 years. And part of the difficulty is because the government are talking about changes to business rates and changes to the way councils are funded. And most people are assuming that both of those will be bad for Inner London Council. So it may well be that, yes, we've got a lot more government money this year than we were expecting. And actually it's gone up the last couple of years, but it might go down in future years, which actually does make it very difficult to plan in future. But having said that, the council always assumed the worst case. So like new homes bonus, they assumed it was dead, but actually, no, we're getting more money in the next year. So, it is very difficult to make some of those long-term decisions. But having said that, we need to find a kind of middle ground. And I think we have in some areas, we have cut too much. Youth services in particular, we've got real problems, I think, with some of our youth centres. There's one near to me. I've actually been walking past it every night. It was open in December, well, for 2 weeks in December. Every night I went past it, didn't see any children there because of a whole bunch of operational reasons. So even though we have a youth centre on the Isle of Dogs, it's actually not playing any real practical role at this point. But having said that, there are some other youth programmes which are doing a really good job. So we kind of need to reinforce success and find better ways of spending that money and continue the process of becoming more efficient. Because there are still areas where we spend a lot of money where perhaps we don't need to do it. And I'm still, if I was elected as the mayor, one of the things I'd be very keen on doing is just as a once-off is what's called a zero-based budget, where we kind of start from scratch. We kind of ask ourselves, what should we be doing as a council? What don't we need to be doing? Whereas what we're doing in our budgets is we kind of take the existing budget and kind of either cut things or add things. So we never look at all of this stuff down here. And there are some departments who spend a lot of money, and I kind of look at that and think, or security, we spend huge amounts of money on securing old buildings where perhaps it would be better off just selling them and getting the sale proceeds, but we're having to pay for security to look after them. So like some buildings we're paying £130,000 a year. You could run, a decent youth centre, well, not decent, but an okay youth centre on £130,000 a year. But no, we're spending it on security instead. So I think that's, if I was elected mayor, that's what I would want to do, is kind of just look back at the basics again.
Yeah, I always advocated that, and it's all like the glazed eyes from the council officers every time I mention that, because there is a bias in the budget where you have certain cost centres who actually set the budget. They never cut their own budget. They always cut someone else's budget, and so there's always a bias in that. And so it'd be good to have a fresh pair of eyes, just taking everything apart and questioning everything. And that hasn't happened. And I did speak to, it was Neville who was the previous. Sorry, there was a previous chief financial officer, and I did say to him, like, look, why aren't you doing this zero-based budgeting? Because we are doing it, but we're doing it phase by phase. But I never understood which phase or which part they were looking at, instead of just having an exercise. And there is a structural issue in the sense that there is no oversight into the finances. You've got overview and scrutiny, but you've got finances, then you've got all these other issues, and you've got to cover it in a single meeting. And it's just crazy. Where if you had whereas in other councils, you've got a separate finance committee, scrutiny committee, which just looks at finance. And for me, that's how you manage an organization, is through its finances. That's every activity generates a financial transaction, and oversight is looking at that and asking why is that, and can it be done another way, and just asking for answers. And there doesn't seem to be that. Even the way we do our budget, it's I forgot what they call it. That intermediate financial strategy, or something?
MTFS, so
medium-term financial strategy. But if you look at the MTFS, it's just like what you said. It doesn't question anything else. It's just the changes. You're just basically approving certain changes. It doesn't question the core. There is no strategic direction, so to speak. It's just crazy. And I've always asked council officers, what's the strategy? And I think they don't understand the question because the strategy is stick to the budget, but it's like that's not strategy, but it's something we need to push. But I've always hit walls when I ask for that, and so it's something that needs to happen. Would any surprises apart from the growth areas? Is it? I know the opposition group always put a budget amendment. Is there anything that comes to mind that you'd like to change in what's being proposed?
Not yet, because normally would have got the budget before Christmas, and normally I spend my Christmas period reading the budget, but they only released this a few days ago, I think, about 3 or 4 days ago. So I haven't had the time to actually read the full budget pack yet. One of the things I am concerned about is kind of fees and charges. So things like parking fees will increase by the rate of inflation, and inflation is pretty high. So even though council tax is only going up by 1%, is actually some of the other charges are going up by a lot more than 1%. So that's another area that I need to kind of look at. And yes, as you said, is that we will produce an alternative budget proposal. We'll do one as a Conservative group, but probably if I'm serious about being a mayoral candidate, I'll probably have to produce my own Andrew Wood budget as well to kind of say this is what I would do if I've been the mayor. The problem will be, I don't have access to all of the detail, so that might be a little bit difficult to do. But yeah, I can probably pull something together to give people an indication of what I might be doing. So
cool. So we look forward to that. Would that be in your discussion group?
Yeah.
Cool.
But we don't have it. Yeah, I think we've got until March to agree it. To remember when the council meeting is. So basically, I've got February to do it, and I have to read the budget first. So it's something to watch out for. We've come to the end of this section. After the break, we're going to discuss the future of St. George's swimming pool. That's a swimming pool in Shadwell that's been closed now due to structural issues that's been discovered by the council. But it seems like there's an alternative put forward by stakeholders. And we're going to discuss that. So we're going to go straight into a break. After the break, we're going to discuss St. George's. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Weekly Politics Show. I'm Councillor Puru with co-host Councillor Andrew Wood. So in this section, we're going to discuss the future of St. George's swimming pool. So Andrew, this is something that you've been closely following. You've been liaising with the stakeholders, campaigners, etc. I know the councillors in Wapping have been quite vocal. So as a councillor, Rabina Khan, who represents Shadwell, has been quite vocal. The Whitechapel councillors have been there at the demo as well. So it seems like it has gathered a head of steam and causing problem for the mayor as well in terms of the demographics who are basically agitated by it. Mainly a lot of people in Wapping, elderly people, use the facilities, votes that Mayor John Biggs was banking on, so to speak. So I know privately he is concerned about what Wapping thinks, so to speak, and Wapping doesn't think that highly of what's happening in centre of St. George's swimming pool. So what's the latest, Andrew? I know when we previously discussed, there was a counter proposal to the council by community groups. Instead of closing it down, can it be rescued? Yeah, so I guess there's probably two things to say. So first of all, Councillor Rabina Khan has got a motion for debate at the council meeting next Wednesday, but it's the last motion, so it probably won't get debated. So I need to have a chat with her, which I haven't had time to do yet, about is there some way of escalating it, because it's a complete mess. The second thing is, yes, there is a group of people, and they've been talking to architects and other experts. And basically what they want to do is go into the building and verify some of the things that the council have been saying about the building and about whether it really does have to be closed. And I know some people may have got this earlier, but I only saw this a few days ago. There was also a 313-page condition survey that was released, that I've seen a couple of days ago. It was actually done in October of 2019. So most of this report is actually several years old, even though, as I said, it only came into the public domain relatively recently. Part of it was updated in summer 2021, but some of the survey work actually started in 2017. And it's one of the most shocking reports that I have read as a councillor, because it is basically a litany of failure and problems. And, actually, if I'd read that report in 2019, I would have closed St. George's the next day, not permanently, but just to fix the problems, because they keep talking about health and safety hazards within the building, water leaking into the main pool that might have been sewage water from a toilet. They weren't sure. But then the other problem then is that COVID then struck, so they closed it down, and it appears that people just walked away from the building. So what they should have done is emptied the pools, the 2 pools which are there. They didn't do it. So algae basically grew and grew and grew. So when they then went back in summer of 2021, after having left it empty for 18 months, the main pool is just covered in algae. And the problem is it's allowed the building to deteriorate even faster than it was already deteriorating. So that there are real doubts now about whether you can actually save the old building. And I know there's a lot of very vocal people who are very insistent that no, we need to save that building and reopen it, but whether that's technically feasible, I have my doubts. But this is why I think we need the independent people, the independent experts, to kind of go in and verify some of this information, which is the point of Councillor Rubina's Khan's sort of motion on this. But it does look like the council allowed this building to basically just kind of fall apart internally. So in August 2011, the council at that point have said, this building only has 5 years of life left. So they kind of knew by 2016, that's kind of it. And what doesn't appear to have happened in 2011 to 2015 under Mayor Lutfur Rahman or under John Biggs is kind of any long-term planning for that building until they did these condition surveys. So it's almost like they were asleep on the ball, weren't doing proper maintenance. There were no proper manuals. So everything was run manually because all the automated systems had failed. On the fire alarm panel, it showed a fault. There were fire issues potentially, but nobody was dealing with those issues. And the building was just getting worse and worse. And when you look at some of the pictures of what it was like inside, it's not good. So the council and GLL Better, who were looking after it day to day, clearly were not looking after that building or coming up with a long-term plan until COVID struck, and then the building kind of gets even worse. And then it's only, I think, in the last year, the council have actively been looking at options, and they did this survey, which finished a couple of days ago. But when you read the survey, you kind of get the impression, which may be false, but it gives the impression that council officers think the building can't be saved. Therefore, let's demolish St. George's, build residential flats on it, but we'll build a new swimming pool in Wapping at John Orwell Centre. But whatever you do, this is going to take years. So all of these people who used to swim there every day don't have any swimming facilities. And York Hall is still closed because, again, they've got problems in that building as well.
What I find, I'm trying to get my head around, because those buildings are managed on behalf of Tower Hamlets Council by GLL. Mm-hmm. So clearly, there hasn't been any managed. So surely they're in breach of their contract, aren't they? Has anyone raised this issue? Like, shouldn't we be clawing back money from GLL? I know they gave a subsidy. Hamlets Council gave a subsidy to GLL, but surely there's a breach of contract. And if you're not going to go after them on this breach of contract, then what's the point of having a arm's length what's the point of having another company manage it? You might as well just manage it. What's the advantage? I don't see any advantage there.
Well, I mean, because they're also meant to be the experts in operating facilities. But having said that, these reports I talked about, they've been commissioned in 2017 and 2019, were commissioned by Tower Hamlets Council and were sent to council officers. But as I said, so one of the problems is that, they do say very clearly that the way the staff had to operate that building was unsafe. And this is GLL staff who were unsafe. So where's the duty of care? Is it GLL that's responsible for their staff operating the building unsafely, or was it the council because it's their building? And did they share these reports with GLL? So when I was reading the report, I sort of wrote in the margins, and Councillor Peter Gold read the same report the next day. We both thought, did anybody at the council actually read this report? Because it is 313 pages, because that might explain why they didn't deal with some of these issues. And I don't know, because as I said, I never even saw the report until we asked for it last Friday. And then I got it on Wednesday, and then so I spent 3 hours on Wednesday night until 11:30 reading the thing.
Speaking to residents who have been, that site has been earmarked for closure before 2010. I think 2008 or something like that. That was when the first discussion was to build residential on it, and so there is sort of like a theory amongst residents that the building was just basically run down to allow that initial plan to go ahead. And everybody knows that after a certain period, after 5 years or 25 years, you have to do refurbishment on assets. Council officers knew that, they just didn't do it, allowing them to strengthen their case to basically close down the facility. And hence the condition report, they knew the 5 years was up. The condition report was there to basically justify the closure. Hence, no one did anything about it. That's the counter narrative that's out there.
Yeah, and
residents in Wapping who are quite active and vigilant, and they're insistent that was always the plan.
No, and there is some evidence for that. Having said that, in 2008 there was actually refurbishment of the building. So they replaced, I think, 4 of the 6 boilers in 2008. But those boilers have a 20-year lifespan. So there should have been something in the council that have said, come 2028, we're going to have to replace the boilers again. And that's quite difficult. And there was evidence. So after 2011, when they agreed a 5-year lifespan, there is some evidence of some basic works in like 2012, 2014 and 2015. But it was obviously very obvious in 2011 that they knew that there was a limited lifespan left. And what was missing, and this is what Hackney Council did, because they also had something called Britannia Bars, so that was going to fail, very similar. But what they've done in the last few years, and I think they took less than 2 years to do it, they built a brand new bars for about £48 million. So they seem to have planned ahead, whereas we didn't. We just seem to have let the building just deteriorate. COVID accelerated that, and then now we're in a situation where the bars have been closed for 18 months, more than 18 months now, probably won't reopen. And if we were to do a planning application for a brand new building, if that's what we're going to have to do, that's another year. So potentially, we're looking at a situation where there is no baths in Wapping, Shadwell Wapping area for 4 years, because there was no pre-planning by the council on any of these issues. And who takes responsibility for that? Ultimately, it has to be the mayor. But at an officer level, I have my worries as well.
Well, there's always been an issue with GLL. I know there were concerns raised while we're giving subsidies to them after, say, and while we keep on renewing the contract. But again, I think we just need to be, there isn't, everybody talks about health inequalities, but it doesn't seem like we're doing anything about it, and we were supposed to be one of the Olympic boroughs with an Olympic quote unquote legacy. It's just like, we just haven't got the handle on it. I just don't know, especially with the impact of COVID, and it hit people quite hard with the high health inequalities.
Yeah.
What does a post-COVID Tower Hamlets look like? Have we learnt the lessons? Yeah, so I think it is something to discuss, and it'd be interesting to see if that comes up in the manifesto as well, as to what is the future of a healthier Tower Hamlets. How do we reduce the health inequalities? How do you get people more active? Like, I've spoken to residents, they did try to go out to the park, a lot of elderly residents. So I was out riding my bike in the morning around my land, just because one elderly resident just wanted to show me the issues. People, it's not safe to walk in the parks, and he was saying, look, because COVID, a lot of people wanted to go out for a morning stroll. They felt unsafe because of the issues. So how do people get healthy? Because they're just sitting at home getting ill. That's what it is. But again, no one's picking that up. What's the next steps, Andrew? If the motion doesn't get heard, I know there is a mechanism to suspend the standing orders, but you need a majority. If it doesn't get heard, what's the next steps? How do people put pressure on the council to respond to certain demands?
So I think we just had to put the public pressure on them, because the reason I asked for the report was to be able to verify what the council were actually saying. And what the report says is actually things were even worse than I expected. But that's not the same as saying that the building is unsavable. It doesn't mean you have to spend a lot of money, and it probably means you can't reopen it anytime soon. But I'm not an expert in these areas. So I think the answer is to get some independent experts in, some architects and other engineers in, to have a look at it, to confirm, whether it is savable or not. But my view is that we should rebuild a swimming pool at St George's. We shouldn't lose that asset, and we should make John Orwell Centre more of a specialist sports facility. Even the discussions we've had about hockey in the past, and also we can build homes there. Both sites, we can build homes as part of any changes as well. So I think that's really the focus has to be on getting that independent confirmation of what we're being told.
Yeah. Well, this is an issue that's going to run and run. It's probably going to have an impact on. It's interesting what impact it has on the election, especially in Wapping, where it has been a contentious issue and has become a marginal. I have noticed loads of Lib Dem party members coming from the south of the river to campaign in Wapping. So let's see whether that is picked up and has an impact. So we're going to go straight into a break. After the break, we're going to discuss the proposed Ballymore residential skyscraper on Canary Wharf. There was an article in The Guardian, an update. There was the planning decision got pulled, but we'll fill you in straight after the break. So we're going to go straight into a break. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Weekly Policy Chat. I'm Councillor Puru with co-host Councillor Andrew Wood. So in this section, we're going to discuss the controversial skyscraper proposed by Ballymore. There was an article in The Guardian which was pushed out saying, how can Tower Hamlets Council approve such a tall building with a single stairwell? So what it is, a 52-storey residential block, I think 400 residential units, which 100 are going to be social housing. The issue is that it has a single stairwell, and I think it's 3 times as taller than Grenfell, according to the diagram. So the issue in Grenfell was it seems like it's designed on the previous on advice that was given to residents in Grenfell, where you just stay, you don't leave the building and wait for the fire brigade to rescue you, and that didn't. A lot of people passed away because the fire service couldn't rescue them. With a single stairwell, there's a potential Grenfell situation. Again, it seems like the building has been designed where if there is a fire in the building, people stay there, and it's 3 times as taller than Grenfell. So how do you rescue people? So So, Andrew, this was supposed to go to, supposed to be approved. I know you've done a lot of work. I heard the local MP as well put in an objection. Is that someone just by passing mentioned that to me? Um, so it has generated a lot of concern. There's got an article in the Guardian. The Department for Levelling Up was asked to comment. They're saying they're reviewing the building codes, so to speak. And then London Fire Brigade finally spoke. So I'll pass it over to you. It was sort of like a bit of a dramatic planning meeting, wasn't it?
Well, it was going to be an interesting meeting until it got cancelled yesterday. So I was preparing to speak against it, as was Councillor Rubina Khan as well. But because this was a Ballymore planning application, so I told all of the people locally who sort of interested in Ballymore following the MPW fire, just to make them aware that this planning application was coming last night. And it was also the last opportunity probably for a number of years to actually sort of oppose a Ballymore planning application in Tower Hamlets, because they don't have any others sort of in the system currently. So a bunch of people got very active on this issue. So a lady called Natalie Carter, who was also interviewed last night and also contributed to the Guardian article. I think they're the people who contacted the Guardian to sort of raise this issue kind of with them. But in terms of the report that was issued by the council, it recommended approval of this building, but it also said London Fire Brigade, no comment. So whether the London Fire Brigade missed the opportunity to comment or didn't supply, I don't know. But yesterday, what they sort of said is they issued a press statement which said, we do have concerns that the design submitted does not provide suitable and convenient means of escape and associated evacuation strategy for all builders. And in buildings with a single escape route, we would expect the developer to have their own fire engineers provide a full review to show the resilience in the event of a fire. And this does not appear to have been carried out, which somebody else had actually spotted on Twitter as well. So Fire Brigade, I think yesterday morning, were asking these questions of Ballymore, and Ballymore just didn't have enough time to answer the questions before the meeting last night. So what Ballymore decided to do was to pull the planning application to deal with the questions from the London Fire Brigade. So the planning application is still there. So I guess we'll have to wait to see whether Ballymore will resubmit with no changes and just more explanation, or whether they will actually make changes to the application. But a lot of people locally have been pointing out, well, there's actually a lot of really tall buildings in the area that have been finished or have got planning permission with, again, single stairwells. And the problem is that if you're above 64 meters, which is the height of the tallest fire brigade ladder in London, in Dubai, they've got helicopters that will drop water on you. In America, they've got helicopters that will pick you up off the roof. But if you are in that building and it's on fire and something goes wrong with the stairwell, that's it, you're dead. Nothing can save you. So the whole idea of the two stairwells is to have some backup and redundancy in case something goes wrong. So, for example, in MPW fire, their stairwell filled with smoke. So people couldn't see their way down, and that shouldn't happen, but it did happen in a Ballymore built building. And I think that's why people want this two stairwells, is because a lot of other countries have rules that say over a certain height you should have two stairwells. And I think this is an area where Tower Hamlets Council, because we build and approve more tall buildings probably than the rest of the country combined. It's another example where we need to take a lead, and work with government to change rules, because it's not something we it might be a struggle for us through planning to say you need to have two stairwells, and we can come up with other reasons for rejection. But yes, we need to be working with government and say to government, look, we've got a 75-story with a single stairwell. That's a bit crazy. Can you work with us to change the rules, or give us the power that for these really tall buildings that we have more powers over fire safety than we currently have?
I think the other issue is that there's kind of like a disjointed kind of approach, in the sense that the planning application doesn't necessarily have to deal in detail with the fire issues. So just to give listeners and viewers an idea, so just say I'm putting up a building, I put a planning application in to the planners, they approve it, and then I do a separate application to, say, the building regulation officers with detailed plans about what would happen in an event of a fire, in terms of the materials being used, or sort of like the distances, and the mechanisms to make sure that people evacuate the building safely. And I think I always was surprised by that, because I have been informed by, sort of like, I used to work in commercial properties, that a lot of the time people used to buy buildings, or once a planning is done, they buy the building with the planning application, and then they realize that they can't actually build it because no one's actually gone through whether this thing is compliant in terms of fire regulations.
Yeah.
So I was always told, just because something's got planning doesn't necessarily mean that you can build it. You need to basically do the due diligence, etc. And I think that's what's happened, and we need to have a bit more of a joint up. I think it just seems like everyone's working in silos.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And we do, the planning department does generate a lot of income. It does. There are a lot of good officers there. It does attract a lot of young planning officers. So we do attract the brightest and the best into the borough, which I'm pleasantly surprised about. I've had sort of like off the record conversations with a lot of them. But it just seems like there isn't a holistic approach to this whole thing. Someone hasn't said, hang on a minute, we're not a normal council, we're not any ordinary council, we're doing a lot of development. Shouldn't we have a different approach, just because of the volume and the type of issues that we deal with? Mm-hmm. And that hasn't been done. It just seems like what it is and this is something that I've observed as well, like initially when I came in, the planning portfolio, you had Councillor Rachel Blake, who was the deputy mayor, and I do have, me and Rachel do have some differences, but she did actually have a complete command of that department. The planning officers were completely answering to her, and there was a certain direction. We were looking at what Islington has done and tried to replicate that and just move the planning department in a certain direction. Since she's gone, it's just left adrift. A lot of the time, the mayor is turning up to a lot of these issues or dealing with these issues. It just seems like the whole thing's kind of like drifting. We were going in a certain direction, there was a certain vision, but it just seems like at the moment there isn't. Is that your impression?
Yeah, so I wouldn't disagree with anything you've just said, including about Councillor Rachel Blake, who is very good. But in retrospect, I'm really surprised that they decided to take this to committee last night, given that the London Fire Brigade hadn't supplied a comment. So did they chase them up? We don't know. And the other issue as well, which I find mind-boggling, is there were going to be two buildings. They've got planning applications in the system. So the Ballymore building, and there's also 30 Marsh Wall. And the local plans have says buildings should be, so I'm trying to get my hands apart, should be 18 meters apart. And that's mainly an overlooking issue. You don't want to look into each other's apartments. But what they're proposing was to build these two buildings 12 meters apart from ground up to the 48th floor. So the other risk that we would have had is that if there had been a fire in one building and an open window in the other building, would the fire have leapt buildings? And I think that close together with the wind in the right direction, I think the answer would have been yes. But who's looking at that issue? And nobody is, because there's one other planning application which is similar. Nobody's thought it was a good idea to build buildings that close together across a narrow street, only 12 meters apart. And again, so people aren't looking at this in the round either, which I think the council need to do as part of the Talk Building Supplementary Planning document, which is in consultation right now.
Yeah, I think we just need a strategic vision in terms of our planning. At the moment, there doesn't seem to be. There's a whole disconnect in the whole thing. And my experience being 4 years as a councillor is the most important function of a local authority is actually planning, because that's where all these issues come out of. Everything we deal with, all the fires, or all the little firefights that we have, or all the issues that we're dealing with. a result of planning decisions. That's and a lot of these could have been preempted if those right decisions were made beforehand or mitigated, so to speak. So I was at a meeting with Mayor John Biggs in Milan with the chief executive of Eastern Homes, and I talked about, look, no one's having a holistic approach. Everyone's working in this silo. No one's looking about the impact on the area. And I did remind Eastern Homes that they do have two functions. One is as a developer, the other one as a social housing tenant. And they need to take account of both of their roles, because what you don't want to do is build up problems as a developer, and then you're dealing with continuous issues as a housing management issue. And I think that's the same issue with Tower Hamlets Council, in the sense you've got a planning authority that operates in a silo, and then all the other departments are dealing with the consequences of it, and they're not talking to each other. Just saying, look, hang on a minute, these are the issues we face. Can you guys mitigate it when you're having discussion? It's just crazy. And I did say to Mary John that there needs to be a new approach. We need to have a much more holistic approach. At the moment, it's just operating in silos. Is that something you're going to change as the mayor?
So that's part of the debate, because there is a lack of a strategy in a number of areas, whether it's sports or regeneration. But what is the vision for Tower Hamlets? What are the challenges we're trying to confront? So working from home, what does that mean for us in terms financially, but in terms of population? The population changes. Lots of Chinese. Lots of people from Hong Kong moving to Tower Hamlets. What is our answer for that? There's a whole wide range of things that we just either we don't talk about or we're just ignoring. And this is, a mayoral race or competition is as good an opportunity as any to have some of those debates.
Well, I look forward. We look forward to the hustings in Canary Wharf, where a lot of these issues are going to be discussed. And see what the candidates have to answer, except for we need more housing. Yes, we do need more housing, but we need sustainable housing, as they say. But we're at the end of our show. Any final words to our listeners and viewers, Andrew? Anything to watch out for in the coming week? I know the Labour selections are coming to an end, and we might do a special section on the runners and the riders and the people who fell off their horse as well at the final, Steve. But anything else to watch out for?
No, so anything coming up next week is the cabinet meeting to look at the budget. I think on Tuesday. We've got a council meeting on Wednesday, which will be very interesting as well. But perhaps we can talk about that next week. So
cool. Well, thank you again, everyone, for listening in and watching the weekly politics show. I'm Councillor Puru with co-host Councillor Andrew Wood on Relax Radio. Have a good weekend. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.